Piracy is a controversial topic. Some consider it synonymous to stealing, while others think of it as the reclamation of what should be considered the common. Both arguments may be valid in their own ways. However, there is one theory which should be widely understood. Piracy pushes products and industries, along with artists, into undiscovered territories, reshaping them and birthing new ones. With this considered, this podcast will attempt to explain the way piracy may alter intellectual property or push industries forward. Piracy will be analyzed for the way it alters the ideological and socioeconomic significance of intellectual property, while using the music industry as an example. Literature from Walter Benjamin and examples from Dadaism will be used when exploring the alteration of intellectual property's ideology. To consider the alteration of intellectual property's socioeconomic significance, this podcast will use statistics from the U.S. sales database, along with a look into the way piracy and streaming has changed the way musicians create revenue. There are two primary concepts this podcast will explore when examining the way piracy alters the ideological meaning of intellectual property. The first concerns the reproduction of art, using examples from Walter Benjamin's The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction and Defremery and Buckland's Copy Theory. The second concept concerns an analysis with the Dadaists, using examples from Marcel Duchamp in particular. Walter Benjamin explains that historically, works of art have always been replicable and that man-made artifacts could always be imitated. He uses examples of replicas being made by pupils for practice, masters for diffusion, and third parties for pursuit of gain. Additionally, Benjamin shows how the mechanical reproduction of a work of art represents something new. The mechanical reproduction of art is to a greater degree than before. It is now designed for complete reproducibility. With this considered, the mechanical piracy or replication of music may be seen as seemingly identical. However, this is not the case. Defremery and Buckland explain how even when two copies are indistinguishable, they can never be entirely the same, simply because they are two distinct particulars. With this in mind, the original piece of music, along with the pirated replication, are considered distinct particulars. Although they may be identical in terms of form, structure, and audio quality, they differ in ideological significance. In Mackenzie Wark's A Hacker Manifesto, she explains that the victorialist class controls intellectual property. Hart and Negri explain this rise of control over intellectual property is due to neoliberal governments and their privatization of what should be considered the commons. Traditional and legal forms of obtaining music fit into this ideological mold. Individuals pay the victorialist class in order to buy their music or intellectual property. Piracy of music or other intellectual property changes this ideological form because it goes against neoliberal forms of obtaining it. The unpirated form was a distinct particular which correlated with the neoliberal ideologies. After being pirated, a new distinct particular has been created, which endorses common good-based anti-neoliberal ideologies. Briticana describes Dada as a nihilistic and anti-aesthetic movement in the arts that flourished primarily in Zurich, Switzerland, New York City, Berlin, Cologne, Hanover, and Paris in the early 20th century. The Dadaists are similar to pirates in that they reproduce and give new meaning to pieces of property. Marcel Duchamp's LHOOQ is an example of a Dadaist work which gives new meaning to an existing piece of property. LHOOQ is a parody of Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, where Mona Lisa is depicted comically with a mustache and goatee. It is thought that the title is a phonetic game. When read quickly in French, it should sound like the French translation for "she has a hot ass." This is strikingly different from the ideology of the original Mona Lisa, which pushes themes such as the fusion of anatomy and nature, along with the facade of human nature. A second work which relates to piracy and ideology is Marcel Duchamp's Fountain, which is a standard urinal presented on its back, rather than upright. Signed and dated R. Mutt, 1917. It was created to be submitted to the Society of Independent Artists, who claimed they would accept any work of art as long as its application fee is paid. The Society's board rejected Fountain, which caused Duchamp, who was a member of the board himself, to resign. Fountain gives a new ideological meaning to the already existing urinal because its sole purpose was to create a new concept from an existing object. This is effective because the urinal has no real conceptual ideology. It is used purely for the process of male urination. While piracy and replication is able to shift the ideological meaning of intellectual property, it is also able to shift its socioeconomic meaning as well. This segment will focus on piracy's impacts on economics and its social implications. Further socioeconomic implications will be explored, such as how streaming has changed the way musicians create revenue and how this impacts the fans and artists of the industry. The US sales database explains how vinyl, cassettes, CDs, and downloads have each been the primary form of music consumption over the past 40 years. Revenue hit a high of $22.7 billion with CD sales in 1999 and a low of $7.3 billion in 2014 as CD sales began to decline. In 2020, the industry has made $12.2 billion in revenue, with streaming the dominant form. Wadfogel explains how the decade since Napster has seen a dramatic reduction in revenue to the recorded music industry. Additionally, technological change has sharply reduced the protection that copyright affords. In terms of economics, Wadfogel shows how file sharing and piracy reduces sales while increasing consumer welfare. Piracy allows consumers who value products above their price, aka high valuation consumers, to obtain products without payment. However, piracy from low valuation consumers would not reduce sales and would instead turn deadweight loss into consumer surplus. In terms of social implications, Deflin explains that more music is being listened to by more people than ever before. Album and song sales have continued to decline. However, the transition to streaming has provided growth for the music industry. Music consumption has risen by 4.2% in the United States over 2015 due to the ease of streaming. As rapper J. Cole talks about in his song 1985,
see you watch Icy in your whip form. I got some good advice, never quit torn, cause that's the way we eat here in this rap game.
Butler explains that the rise of streaming has largely eliminated music piracy. However, it has drastically reduced revenue for musicians. To explore, Spotify pays only between $0.003 and $0.005 per stream. This means a musician would need around 250 streams to earn $1. Some music platforms pay more than Spotify, such as Napster, Tidal, and Apple Music, though this revenue is insignificant compared to what artists may have received when fans bought CDs, records, and tapes. Because of this reduction in revenue, artists must now rely on live events and merchandise as a source of revenue. Wang explains that live events are quickly shaping up to be one of the most lucrative spaces for musicians in the digital music era. As listeners become more immersed in streaming services, they crave more intimate experiences with their favorite artist. Tours and music festivals are getting larger, and concert and ticket companies are growing. Wang also explains that artists are now expanding beyond traditional forms of merchandise. Artists are beginning to create crowdfunding sources, apps, subscription packages, and limited music releases. An example of this may be Kanye West's listening party for his album Donda, which took place at Chicago's Soldier Field Stadium on August 26, 2021. A reported $7 million was made in merchandise sales before the album was even released.
Holy shit.
Even if you are not ready for the day, it cannot always be night.
The trend of musicians gaining more revenue from their merchandise and live events has created another socioeconomic difference in the industry, which is based on the alteration of a musician's social identity. Many musicians now focus largely on business ventures and use their music almost for the sole purpose of self-promotion, rather than revenue generation. In this sense, they should be considered business people. Examples include again Kanye West with his Yeezys brand, Tyler the Creator's golf brand, Ariana Grande's perfume line, and Justin Bieber's collaboration with Tim Hortons' Tim Biebs. This is not solely seen in the music industry. For example, athletes create their own brands, such as Wayne Gretzky's alcohol and Michael Jordan's shoe line. It'll be interesting to see if, in the future, streaming services will affect the film and TV industry, along with other industries as well, and if directors, producers, and actors will need to focus more on side businesses rather than their main profession.